The tides in the AI world look like they're shifting. On April 24th, while every developer in the world was downloading DeepSeek v4 and OpenAI's GPT 5.5 was only 24 hours old, Google quietly wired $10 billion to one of their greatest competitors, with another 30 billion on the table. The recipient of this investment was Anthropic, the makers of Claude, the same Claude that probably writes your customer service email, builds your client dashboards, builds your client briefs, and runs your internal docs. Most reactions this week are reading this headline: Google doubles down on Anthropic with a $40 billion investment. I tend to think that this is the beginning of the shift by the Alphabet company. It's going to be a drip feed. Eventually, Google is going to end up owning Anthropic. And the headline is pretty powerful. Doubles down, $40 billion in the investment. However, a lot of people are missing the part that actually matters. So that's not just a $40 billion investment. It's $10 billion in a cash injection, 30 billion in performance milestones, and a commitment by Anthropic to use 5 gigawatts of compute on Google's own TPU infrastructure. That just sounds like Google is going to have Anthropic by the balls. And that's the part that a lot of people are now really talking about. It's that, and it's the one that actually changes who controls the AI you're building your business on. This is a huge shift. I think this is primarily also on the basis that a lot of people have been complaining that they're hitting their usage limits so quickly, the degradation of the quality of Claude code, whereas DeepSeek v4 is smashing it right now. GPT 5.5 doing quite well in the image side of things, and you also have Codex. So the competition is heating up, and DeepSeek has a little bit of an unfair advantage where the business model that DeepSeek has is it's giving you an open source model that's also evolving quite quickly and is also giving you a great output, and it's giving you great performance. Something is going to have to give, especially with Anthropic. The usage limits and the cost of Anthropic is going to be one of the deterrents, or is what's going to attract users away from Anthropic and into other models. My reservation to using DeepSeek before was that the quality just wasn't as good on the basis of how quickly GPT, Gemini, and Claude was moving. However, with the recent upgrade and the recent development, it is getting there and it's actually usable. And I've been using it a little bit more recently. And that's also on the basis that the token usage and the pricing for DeepSeek is so low for the quality that you do get that it's almost a no-brainer not to use DeepSeek v4 for your small tasks or your AI agents, the DeepSeek v4 Flash. It is more attractive to use DeepSeek v4 Flash for your AI agents if you're using OpenClaw, Hermes agent, or whatever you're using, because the output now and the performance with the capabilities that DeepSeek v4 is able to do now is worth it. And I'm going to break down exactly why this deal is so massive and what 5 gigawatts actually means in the real world. And the question every small business owner watching this needs to answer is, what is my AI stack going to be? And what tools do I need to utilize in my business? And what are the costs? If you're a small business owner running any meaningful workflow on Claude, and I know a lot of you are, this is why this story is so important, because it's not just another Anthropic Google story. 6 months ago, Anthropic was a frontier lab with a board, a roadmap, and a degree of independence. After this deal, Google has previously held about 14% stake. Now it has committed up to $40 billion in fresh capital and gets 5 gigawatt compute lock-in. That's not a partner, that's something closer to a controlling position. And in the same month, in the same week actually, Anthropic released 4.7 and OpenAI released the GPT 5.5. And right behind all of that was this deal. However, let's have a look at the numbers. It's $10 billion now in cash at a 350 billion valuation, the same valuation Anthropic carried in February, then up to 30 billion more contingent on Anthropic hitting certain performance milestone. The reason the valuation point matters is because Google did not mark up the price. They got in at the existing number, and according to the Motley Fool in their write-up, they called it a screaming bargain, because it is. That phrase in itself, in the headline, says a lot. And then the part most coverage skipped, the milestone clauses, is that performance milestones for a $30 billion check are not soft, because we don't know the exact terms because they're private, but milestone tied money in venture deals at this scale historically translate into board observation rights, infrastructure commitments, or production direction influence. It could be a variety of these. This isn't Google buying optionally on the most strategic AI lab they don't already own, which is pretty interesting, to be honest. Here's a number that matters more than the dollar figure, and almost no one is really reporting it. Anthropic committed to using 5 gigawatts of compute power on Google's TPU infrastructure as part of this deal. So to put it in a real world scale, a modern nuclear reactor, roughly 1 gigawatt of power. 5 gigawatts is roughly 5 nuclear reactors worth of electricity. It is genuinely on a scale of a small country. And that computer power is not on Anthropic's hardware. It's on AWS, which Amazon also invested. Even though Amazon also invested, this compute power is going to be on Google's TPU. Ideally, if Google controls the energy into Anthropic and they have a massive amount of capital injection in Anthropic, Google does technically have control of Anthropic from here, in my opinion. Because if you control the energy, if you control the energy of a company, you control the energy of a country. At any point, if you control energy, you have the overall control of whatever it is, all right? What that means is, within the next several years, the model you call when you ask Claude something at the chip level is going to be running a Google Silicon, which is ideally exactly the same as when you use an iPhone. You're using an iPhone, but the screens from iPhones, last time I checked, they were made from Samsung. I could be wrong. If I am, correct me down in the comments. Think about that for a second. That is a data point that truly matters, because it means that the units of economics, the latency of Claude, the geographic availability of Claude, all of that is now downstream of Google's infrastructure decisions. I'm very optimistic about this because I strongly believe that this is going to help Anthropic. However, I have my reservations because you can see the monopoly being built in AI. And I've always hedged my bet on Google. Ever since Gemini came out, I just said that Google is going to end up destroying this, because I'm not destroying it, but taking this over, because they've got the largest amount of capital. Considering they've got their own chips and their own infrastructure, it is inevitable, in my opinion, that Google just becomes the industry standard. OpenAI is always going to have a place, but I'm going to hedge my bet right now and say OpenAI is going to end up being the MySpace of AI. And this is where it gets really weird. In the same month that this deal happened, Google also shipped their own frontier models. They shipped out Gemma 4. They also shipped out a Gemini 3.1 Flash update. So they have their own frontier models that are competing with Anthropic. Their native modal reasoning, real-time processing, image generation, their video generation is top tier, and they're dominating that space right now. It's actively pitched as Claude's competitor in enterprise sales. And also, if you look at anti-gravity, the IDE, the way Google is connecting its ecosystem to each other and giving you a full, well-connected ecosystem that works interchangeably within each other, you can see that there's a monopoly being built. You can say that Google's just hedging its bet and their own model might win. or Anthropic's might win. Either way, Google owns a piece of both companies and it's hedging its bet in the AI space. We could say it's just smart capital allocation. The less charitable read is that Google sees Anthropic as the only frontier lab with a long-term credible claim. And on the safety aligned enterprise market, the lab that just shipped Mythos and Project Glasswing, and they're aware that they're not letting that company drift into someone else's orbit, especially not Microsoft, especially not Amazon. Even though Amazon also has a stake, that $40 billion isn't a hedge, it's a fence. But notice what both reads have in common after this deal is that Anthropic is less independent than it was in March. And every small business owner watching who built their workflows on Claude in 2024 or 2025, or just the general user who's dabbling into the LLMs in the AI space, and you're starting to create your own agents, it is important to know that now there's a downstream of decisions that are being made inside the Alphabet company. And I'm all for it because Anthropic, the most recent model confessed by Anthropic themselves, it was not the best. And in fact, the quality has dropped. Whereas if we are 100% honest with the way Google has evolved over time, Google has always been or seems to always keep itself on the cutting edge of technology and always seems to find the right path. The frontier AI industry is being consolidated and a lot of people are missing it. You can see the board being laid out. You can see the monopoly beginning to occur. Microsoft is the principal of OpenAI, reportedly billion plus and counting. Amazon committed up to 25 billion to Anthropic in 2 tranches. Google has now committed up to 40 billion more on top of its existing 14% stake. So if you add it all up, the 4 most important AI labs in the world right now are functionally underwritten by the same 3 big tech companies that already control your cloud, your search distribution, and your enterprise software. The competition is done. The AI cartel has began to take its roots, and it is going to be very unlikely that you're going to be able to compete anymore. The board has been laid, but here's where I push back on that argument. Anthropic genuinely does need the capital. The compute requirements for training the next generation of models are at a scale that no independent company can self-fund. Mythos, Opus 4.7 are not built in a bedroom GPU. I think the only one that might be able to hold its own right now is probably Grok, because Grok is funded by Elon Musk. Perplexity is also doing quite well. However, the board has been laid. The $10 billion in cash, the 5 gigawatt of compute are real operational unlocks. So if you're an Anthropic engineer, this deal is the difference between shipping the next model in 12 months and 36 months. And for what it's worth, Anthropic has structural commitments to safety, research that other labs don't have on paper. So you can defensively argue that consolidation towards Anthropic is a safer outcome than consolidation towards whoever else. But this is the editorial part, okay? We don't really know what these guys are actually going to be doing with it. If we look at JP Morgan, we look at Microsoft, we look at all these other enterprise contracts, we're entering a phase where most capable AI models are made by labs that are functionally owned by big tech. They're sold via big tech cloud platforms and gatekept by big tech. The independent challenger story, the one Anthropic told for years, is materially weaker after April 24th than it was on April 23rd. My question to you guys is, if the AI you've built on your business is now functionally owned by big tech, are you going to change your vendors? Do you hedge with the open source? Do you do nothing? Because there's a defensible answer for each. And the answer says something about how you're thinking about platform risk in your business right now. However, because me personally, I run everything on Google, I just eventually just saw the cards being laid out. I was like, all right, cool. Google's going to dominate this space. just primarily based on economics. They own the cloud servers. They've got the engineers. They've got the capital. They've got the energy. It was inevitable. I just could not see Google losing this race. Yeah. If you want more news, more analysis, and you want to stay ahead of the AI game, I've got a community called Born Builders on school.com where we share tools, workflows, system breakdowns, and we run through the news together every week. It's free. The link is in the description. And we just stay ahead of the game, just learn new things as things do come out. I try and keep you guys updated as I learn new things as well. And subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.